Thanks a lot for this question. Of course, the energy prices crisis is the key topic which is affecting consumers right now. I mean, we see, for example, in Belgium, an average family pays now 2,500 euro to heat their home with natural gas for 1 year. That's 43% more than did they paid last year. So that's a huge increase. Now, will that affect the Green Deal? What we are hoping for as a consumer organization is that this energy prices crisis, beyond immediate measures, is also a wake-up call to make a shift transition to renewables. We see that countries with larger shares of renewables in their system are getting better through this crisis than countries which are largely reliant on natural gas, because the prices are largely driven by natural gas. So what we would like to see with this crisis is a shift transition to renewables.
Well, thank you for the question. I think first it's essential to understand that higher energy prices is by no means a consequence of the clean energy transition. But to the contrary, it is a strong reminder that we should accelerate this transition. So the spike very quickly in these prices takes origin in the spike on the fossil fuel prices, which is attributable to a convergence of factors. And these factors, on the one hand, demand-supply factors linked to the market, and because of the post-COVID strong economic rebound, and in particular the spike in the industrial activity in China, but generally in Asia, plus a low level of the stocks generally in the fossil fuels, and also the limited ability for the supply to scale up accordingly, because there was some underinvestment in the sector over the last years. There is now a very strong demand, limited supply, and so the prices are going up. So Europe is, actually, we all know that Europe is engaged into the clean energy transition, accelerating the deployment of renewables, but still today, we rely 70% on fossil fuels, and most of which are imported from outside of the bloc. To give you an idea, 50% of European gas is imported from Russia. And we know this is the other aspect of it. It's not demand supply, it's more geopolitical impact. We know the difficulties and the relationship between Europe and Russia, and therefore there is a strong lever from Russia on Europe through tightening the supply of gas. So basically this shows that the EU Green Deal is more than ever a priority, and the only way to avoid energy price spikes in the future is precisely to accelerate the implementation of this EU Green Deal. And this will lead us to have local clean energy production and decrease, of course, the bloc reliance on imported fossil fuels. Of course, we all understand this is a multi-decade process. It will take probably a couple of decades before we get totally independent. And it means that in the meantime, Europe should take a number of actions to, let's say, avoid, first of all, to avoid these spikes in the future. So this is probably getting more different suppliers, so diversifying the supply, trying to decrease as much as possible fossil fuel use, but also it needs to take targeted measures to protect the most vulnerable households and also enterprises.
Yeah, well, that's a very relevant question, because I mean, I can feel you very much on this, because I'm also a tenant and I have exactly the same problem that, I mean, you would like to engage in the energy transition, but you can't do so because your landlord simply decides that he will not have any benefit out of it if he puts a solar panel on your roof, or he changes your gas boiler to a heat pump. So that's a problem which many consumers have out there in Europe. And what we would like to do about is to have incentives for both sides. So what can we do with legislation to make sure that both the landlord is benefiting and the consumer? So what we do, for example, in what we think, for example, what our members think in Germany is that if there is, for example, a carbon price, both the landlord and the tenant should pay a part of it to make sure that both have an incentive to make the switch. So this is very important that we think about how to make everyone benefit from making the switch.
Well, that's a $1 billion question, of course. It's a very good question. And it brings back exactly to the first comment I made in the beginning, that, you know, we are all interdependent, and even for all technologies, we're depending somehow either on fuels or on materials that we need to build them. It's a very key question you're asking there, because indeed, China has, I would certainly not say a monopoly, but a very, very high share of the production of critical minerals, not only rare earths, but in general critical minerals. It doesn't mean that they have it in their land. It means that they have contracts which enables them to exploit the mines wherever they are, mostly in Africa, to take an example, and they make the transformation process to get to the usable rare earths or critical minerals. So they have really a high hand on this. It, by the way, explains why China is so generous with Africa in general. And we've seen over the last year the incredible, let's say, surge in external diplomacy of China within Africa. For instance, with the COVID vaccines, just to take an example. And also, of course, in terms of financing huge infrastructure works in Africa. Now, we could not imagine that China would stop, you know, supplying these, because in a market, of course, both sides are interdependent, because China has also a need to have an output for this industry of theirs. But it's true that this is a high dependency, and that we should absolutely look at how EU as a bloc, in order to save our strategic autonomy, we should decrease this dependency. And that is something that we're doing in all the EU programs. For instance, if I take just an example on batteries, for instance, there is a lot of research which is done first on decreasing the use of materials, and second, in trying to identify alternative materials to those which are critical. But this is absolutely a key question. In a nutshell, to summarize my answer, I think that what we, in terms of energy dependency, we have been almost through 150 years in a situation where the name of the game for geopolitics of energy was the security of supply of fossil fuels. What we see now with the climate crisis, which has been unfolding over the last, let's say the last 15 years. We knew about it much before, but it's only 15 years that we're looking at it, is that we are entering now into what we call a race to net zero, which means that all the blocs are putting their pledges to go to net zero, because this is an existential condition for society. And the result of that is we will see the reliance and the importance of fossil fuel decreasing over time. Of course, it's not over. We know that the consumption of fossil fuel will continue for decades, but the pressure will progressively decrease, certainly during this decade and through the next 3 decades, certainly. And to the contrary, we'll see a high pressure on getting industrial leadership on the clean technologies. Industrial leadership means the ability to master and to be leader in producing the technologies, energy technologies of the future. And this translates in a nutshell in 2 things. And you'll see in the future a big focus on these 2 elements. First of all, a race for technology leadership. So it means the patents, you know, really the intellectual capital, which is in the technology. And the second is the materials that are needed to build these technologies. And these are the 2 main pillars that will build industrial leadership, which is what will bring the competitiveness between the blocs.